Hello everyone.
बदली भाई
Warm welcome to our prestigious NES webinar. Our today's speaker is Dr. Suratwala. Dr. Suratwala is a renowned otologist and neuro-otologist of our country. He is president of our prestigious NES right now. He is director of Vertigo and Voice Clinic Surat, Gujarat. He is involved in many research related to peripheral vertigo and sensory neural hearing loss. He is a rare combination of successful private practitioner with academic interests with innovative background. Earned many honors, including first Indian to deliver a posterior crust technique in stapes surgery at Sydney University in 1990. Came out in 1995 with interesting findings on Bera in active Meniere's disease. He had developed an ultra-invasive 12 approach for retrosigmoid vestibular nerve section in year 2007. Today, we have on panel Dr. Anita Bhandari, a renowned otoneurologist from Jaipur, Dr. Avinash Bijlani, very senior otoneurologist from Delhi, and Dr. Vikas Gupta, Associate Professor, AIMS Bhopal. We have a wonderful team here for detailed discussion. Now I would like to request Dr. Suratwala sir to start his talk on vertigo in
शेयर
otosclerosis.
स्क्रीन वन
Yes, sir. You can share the screen now, sir. Suratwala, sir.
या प्लीज इट इज स्टिल शोइंग योर स्लाइड
Let me check. Oh, 1 minute. Yeah, clear. You can share. Share screen. करो.
एक्चुअली सर आपके यहाँ से आपका स्क्रीन शेयरिंग स्टॉप होगा तभी हमारा स्क्रीन शेयरिंग होगा।
नहीं, I don't. मैं स्टॉप करने का जरूरत नहीं है. आप शेयर स्क्रीन बोलो, वो आ जाएगा.
उसमें सर एक एरर आ रहा है मुझे कि यू कैन नॉट स्टार्ट स्क्रीन शेयर व्हाइल द अदर पार्टिसिपेंट इज शेयरिंग।
Okay, wait 1 minute. Okay, I will make you co-host. You are already co-host. Yeah, you already co-host. Share करो और share करो. Try again.
यस 1 मिनट। ओके
Yeah, है, आ जाएगा.
नाउ इट्स डन।
Yes, that's it. That's it.
Good evening to everybody, and you are all prestigious participants for this webinar series arranged by NES. Dr. Hitesh, I am very much thankful you for the generous information and generous introduction given regarding me. Before I start my presentation, I would like to thank all the executive members, and I am also thankful to the Almighty for giving such a talented, hardworking executive team to me. And with their untiring efforts, we could start this webinar series and many more programs like this in the future to come. Now, coming to the today's topic, giddiness and otosclerosis. This is a less talked topic and equally less written in the journals. Very few literature is there available with this. But then everybody who does the staphylotomy does come out with a problem of vertigo post-operatively for the variable period. So in fact, today's presentation, I would like to divide into 3 or 4 stages. One is in the anterior surgery phase, second is the perioperative phase of the surgery or the treatment, and third is in the late post-operative stages of the surgery. As well as the 4th part of the presentation will be covering some of the associated conditions along with the otosclerosis. For today's presentation, I would like to dedicate to my teachers, Professor M.G. Chepan, who was one of my favorite ones, Dr. A.B.R. Desai from Mumbai, Professor Michael Paparella, and Professor W.P.R. Gibson. Bill Gibson, I fondly call him from Sydney University. So what we are knowing and what we shall know is the theme of this
અને ઓલું
presentation.
આપને હેન્ડ ઓલો હેડફોન
Yes, Prahlad. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello. So let's go through one of the few of the basic facts. The incidence is 3 in 1,000. The disease is presenting from 11 to 30 years. It is also known as a hereditary disease and accentuated with the pregnancy phase. Every pregnancy is rising by 30%. 15 to 20% cases are bilateral and conductive loss rarely rise to 35 years. So this is a snag sometimes in our practices that many of the patients who have got a stagnant loss of hearing, they may not turn up for the treatment. Sakyara has proven that if non-treated, there is a 1 dB rise per year in SN loss. But usually we have seen this in starting of the patients after age of 45 or so. Giddiness is present in 25% of the cases in the foreign literature. But personally, if you ask me my experience, the percentage doesn't go beyond 10 or 15%. Now, this is again the important aspect of understanding the disease. The pathology says the pregnancy has got a hormonal changes causing the disorderly renin angiotensin activity. There are the enzyme liberation from the immaturely forming bone, particularly in the osteoclastosis, which liberate the toxic enzymes and so loss of hair cells in the cochleovascular segment. This has been proven by Grayle in 2003. And that the degeneration of ganglion also been in 1993. There is a loss of hair cells which will cause the low dense hair population, which we will like to call it as a degenerative neuropathy. The symptoms of vertigo, this all depends on whether there is a spontaneous degeneration or gradual degeneration. If it is a gradual degeneration in the form of apoptosis, the patient may not come with a history of vertigo. This happens because of the central compensatory act. It is always debate whether it is a genetical or viral. The McKenna in 1986, he has demonstrated that the nucleocapsid present in the osteoclast. And Potoka in 2004 has shown the measles RNA in the foci of the otosclerotic lesion at the stapes. So if you combine both of these observations, then one can say that measles virus produced the genetical mutation to initiate the disease process. Females have a greater incidence of measles and hence the otosclerosis, that is in the ratio of 16 to 10. Estrogen has stimulatory effect on the osteoclastic process. And osteogenesis imperfecta, this is less in my demographic region, but it is more common probably in Himalayan region, and where the COL1A1 gene link has been demonstrated between osteogenesis imperfecta and osteosclerosis and otosclerosis. Now, what is the present consensus? This can involve footplate, particularly the anti-fenestrone, round window, other ossicles, for example, long process of incus and lenticular process are also, we have seen, been involved in the process of otosclerosis, causing the necrosis ultimately, or the dislocation or disarticulation of the incudocephalic joint. Clinical otosclerosis is 10% of the histological otosclerosis. Now again, histopathologically, if you see, the biological process, biopathological process goes in 3 stages. One is the osteoclastic phase, followed by the blastic phase, and then the maturation, where you get the spongy bone, and that's why we call some of the people name it as the otospongiosis. Osteoclastic process, this is one of the most important phases of the disease, which is the starting phase, which causes the enzyme liberation, so the hair cell loss. There is a lack of osteoprogen, which splits up the spongy bone formation. This comes into play into the last stage of the otosclerosis. Endoscopic membrane is involved with decreased density of the type 1 as well as the type 2 hair cells in vestibule. So this is in contrast to the traditional belief that only the type 1 cells are affected, but it's not true. And this has been proven in number of temporal bone dissections by Hisley and Pepparella at the Ear Institute, which is established at Minnesota, USA. At present, lowly reported incidence may be due to the lack of good case finding and reduced input following measles vaccination program. The vestibular vestibular involvement in otosclerosis. All the segments can get affected with the evidence of hair cell losses. Sacral and lateral canals are, however, more prone to get affected, and endoscopic membrane involvement can be linked with the vestibular hypofunction. Now, this is one of the temporal bone section slides where you see the sacral and utricle and the endoscopic membrane, which is quite thick and in the process of otosclerosis. And here you will see all the three stages of the pathological process. The blackish one, you will see the osteoclastosis, the lacunae is the osteospongosis, and the red one, you will find is the osteoblast cells are present over here. And see the osteoblastic activity going quite near to the, or almost pressing the stria vascularis of the scala media segment. And this is the vestibular area where you will see the upper one, you will see the falling of the this thing, inner hair cells, and this is the outer hair cells, this is the other way, sorry. You will find the population is going less dense. Lot of cells, they are going under degeneration in the process of apoptosis. Now coming to the diagnosis, most of us are able to diagnose it very easily. However, I would like to repeat some of the things. One is the tuning fork test. Now, out of the tuning fork test, which is RNase, will be showing negative, the 500 Hz frequency will give you the most consistent finding. The Schwartz sign, which is the redness you will see on the promontory, is not a reliable finding and is available and present in about 10% of the cases. However, if you see the Schwartz sign as a positive, you should rule out two other conditions which can give the similar sign. One is the barotrauma, traveling, ascending or descending from the high altitude to the high altitude or from the high altitude. And second could be the mid-layer catarrh, which can also been seen as the Schwartz sign on the otoscopy. Number of cases were diagnosed as the spot diagnosis just by hearing the voice of the patient, which is muffled voice in the initial stage of otosclerosis, or in the subtle case of the otosclerosis where the sensory neural involvement is not there. The audiogram will be showing that the dominant conductive loss. But once the sensory neural involvement is dominating, then the muffled voice quality will be lost. So that could be one of the clues for you to diagnose clinically as a cochlear otosclerosis. Now coming to the PTA, you will find all the types, all the patterns in the audiogram you can find. That is a pure conductive loss, mixed loss, and then Carhartt's notch. Now Carhartt's notch are again variable demographically. It has been classically described to occur at 2000 Hz. But in my area, I have seen it commonly with either 1000 Hz or at the 500 Hz. I do not know the reason of it, but this is our finding over the last few decades or so. Now coming to the tympanometry. Now this is the investigation which has been classically taught that this is one of the diagnostic for otosclerosis. However, there are limitations to the tympanometry because of the certain errors that I will be addressing you shortly. Acoustic reflex should show the inversion, and there's a C-vamp, which is usually not useful investigation to diagnose in the otosclerosis because it's usually negative. HRCT, nowadays for every patient we are getting HRCT done. That will show either the lucency, it will also help in grading the otosclerosis, and also you will be able to detect the halo sign on the CT images. Now, what is the differential diagnosis? When the patient comes with the conductive loss with the vertigo. The only diagnosis, differential diagnosis should come into one's mind is the superior canal dehiscence. Now, how do you differentiate? This is obviously there is a less loss, conductive loss, usually at the lower frequencies, You can differentiate, and not usually not more than 10 to 20 dB of the air conduction loss. And this is an important sign, clinical sign of the Valsalva test you are doing with a positive and negative pressure, where the upbeating nystagmus will be converted into the downbeating one. The CVM will show the lower threshold in case of canal dehiscence, and 3T MRI should confirm your clinical suspicion. When the patient comes with vertigo, the mix or SN loss, what is the possibility? Most common possibility is a Meniere's disease. The CVM usually will be positive to give the clue of Meniere's disease in about 60 to 70% of the cases. And then ADR, this was one of our research outcomes, where you will find the shifting of the wave 3 and wave 1 on the left side. And when you give the diuretic, you will find the shifting of the wave to the right, which may be coming into the normal range or may not be coming into the normal range. But that will tell you that the disease is reversible partly with the diuretic, and that may be giving you a proper use of the diuretics ethically. ECOG is a gold standard test, and almost 90% of the spasticity have been observed in our cases because we are doing ECOG within 48 hours of the episodic vertigo attack. 3T MRI, this is recently started, so I don't have a big series of this to comment upon, but some of the other workers with whom I have dialogues in conferences and otherwise, the double dose contrast with 4 hours delay will give 50% of the cases. This is nowadays we are agreeing upon. Another way to diagnose the endolymphatic dilatation is giving intratympanic gadolinium 24 hours in advance before you refer it for the echospin MRI. Now, this is an audiogram of the left side. You will see the conductive loss of one of our patients, and here you will see the tympanogram is absolutely normal. Now, why this happens is a mystery, but some of the causes, common causes, I can tell you. One is the mechanical error, third is the manual error. There is not adequate of the pressure pump developed by the tympanometric device. These are the common errors which can happen and can produce the normal or unexpected response on the tympanogram from what you expect otherwise. So better to rely on the acoustic reflex test. Now this is on your right, you will find the inversion of the waves, and this is the unoperated cases. And when you operate the cases, the inversion wave would be absent because you are cutting out the staph tendon. Now CVM, this is the advance in the advanced otosclerosis. To see the response is absent, and this is a bilateral case where again you will see the CVM response. The CVM is not as expected as you desire for. So why HRCT in otosclerosis? Why you should do? Number one, the confirmed morphological diagnosis. Secondly, to grade the disease process. Thirdly, if any cochlear anomalies are there, which are usually present in the congenital fixation of stapes, that you will come across. Detection of the perilimb gusher, as well as if there is enlarged vestibular aqueduct syndrome, that also you will be able to diagnose on HRCT. So what is the protocol? Now this slide has been provided by my radiologist, Dr. Sule, and this 0.65 mm section thickness axial imaging with multiplanar reformations at 0.6 mm with 0.1 mm overlap. This is good enough to give you the good impression of the lesion. No IV contrast should be used and low dose blues should be used so that you can delineate between dense, hyperdense and hyperdense picture of the lesion over there.
So we have no voice. Suratwala sir. Hello. Suratwala sir. No voice. Oh, okay, maybe. No, he's not muted. He's not muted, but probably his Bluetooth is switched off. Hello, sir, voice चला गया. Voice चला गया. There is no voice. Friends, Dr. Suratwala is going to restart his computer. There is some problem from his end. From our end, there is no technical issues. I think suddenly he lost his audio. Okay. So what we will do is, meanwhile, if our panelists are there, they can take some questions. Hitesh, sir, you can, invite questions. Where is Dr. Hitesh? His audio is muted. I'll unmute him. Okay.
Hello.
Yeah. You can ask
Yes,
questions
yes,
till then. Take questions,
yes, sir.
and I will unmute the panelists, all panelists. Okay.
Okay, okay, sir.
Yeah,
Please,
Dr.
please do.
Avinash. Dr. Avinash is.
Hello, Avinash, sir.
Avinash sir, 1 minute. He is stuck with some problem, so he may take some time.
Hello,
If he
Anita,
has-
ma'am.
Yeah, Dr. Avinash is here. Okay.
Hello, Avinash, sir.
1 minute, Avinash.
Good evening.
Yeah, Dr. Avinash is there. Dr. Anita ma'am is still not there. And who else? Dr. Vikas may be
Vikas.
there. Yeah, Vikas is there. Yeah, I will unmute to Dr. Vikas. Okay.
Hello, Avinash, sir.
Yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Sir, question from Dr. Riaz. Can autosclerosis result in resonance shift of middle ear?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, I was reading one article quite some time back. That was, I think, by Timothy Hain. So I think I'm not sure about the reference I'm giving, but yes, it does cause a shift. I think yes.
Okay, sir. Another question is, sir, from all panelists, have you find ever vertigo vertigo or dizziness is the first complaint among autosclerosis patient?
Sorry, could you go again?
Uh, have you ever find vertigo as a first complaint in patient of autosclerosis?
No, not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay. Anyone find? Vikas
It
sir?
it may be that patient comes with the vertigo, and when we find out that there is, when we obviously examine the patient and do the other investigation, we find out that the patient is having the hearing loss also. But all these cases should be further investigated, because most of the time, if you see, even you see the literature where they have multiple cases have been reported from few centers, they have found out that most of the time these are the two different pathologies. But otosclerosis as such presenting as vertigo itself is not that common. Matlab,
Okay.
I have not seen it.
Another question from Dr. Amit Kesri. What is the cause of vertigo in post-op period? Anita ma'am.
Anita ma'am, she is not there.
Okay.
I didn't see her. No, she is not logged in. I don't know if
Vikas
she
sir.
has logged in any different with any different ID. I'm not sure.
Post-op, he's
Yes,
asking
sir.
about the post-op vertigo only.
Yes, sir.
And the
Yes, sir. What are the common causes?
post-stepidotomy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, there are the multiple causes which is there in the standard textbooks, like if blood goes into the vestibule, or if uh, there is some, when you curate the bone and then your that bone dust has gone into the, and many people like to first drill a bit of the canal wall and then curate it later on. And if like your piston is too long and you are doing a procedure in the under general anesthesia where patient just cannot tell you that he is having vertigo, so these are the common causes. Or like if in the post-op, once you have done the procedure, everything has gone fine, and when you have reposited the flap back, you have put in a lot of gel foam over there, and then it is going to push the incus itself. So these are the common causes where you take all the precautions and still you get the vertigo.
Okay, sir. Another question from Dr. Hitesh. Difference between semicircular canal dehiscence vertigo and autosclerotic vertigo. Is there any difference?
Dr. Avinash, I think.
Yeah, basically, you see, autosclerosis vertigo can present in various situations. Sorry, rather various forms, not transitory vertigo, just like you get in superior semicircular canal dehiscence. Uh, Vertigo as a result of autosclerosis can be transitory sometimes, and in that case, it may be difficult to differentiate it from superior semicircular canal dehiscence. But then, by and large, if it is a persistent vertigo, spontaneously occurring without provocation, and if it is positional vertigo, all these forms have been reported in the literature. Not that they are common. I think it's an extremely uncommon situation we are all talking about today.
Yes, sir.
So there's a one situation which has nothing to do with otosclerosis. If you have on the contrary, if you have a hypermobile stapes foot plate, you can get Tulio's phenomena with that kind of a situation. I'm talking about something absolutely a different situation. In otosclerosis, you got fixation of the bone, and that a new woman bone can be, affecting the otic capsule and everything, all that blah blah. But when you're talking about this otolith, this thing. Uh, Comparing it to superior semicircular canal dehiscence, no. For otosclerosis, it is very difficult to mimic that situation. But there's another situation called hypermobile stapes foot plate. Because if you see the anatomy, the saccule is just about 1 millimeter from the stapes foot plate. So if you have a hypermobile foot plate, in fact, I was wondering if you have done a stapedotomy and you have put in a piston. So maybe if that piston is loosely placed and that piston gets hypermobile, that can give rise to recurrent vertigo, and that can give rise to Tulio phenomena.
Okay, sir. Vikas sir, one important question from Subhas Garg. When tinnitus or vertigo are predominantly presenting symptoms in autosclerosis, then surgery has to be advised with guarded prognosis or no? Sir, please unmute Vikas sir. Prahlad sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, if you ask whether it is a contraindication, it is actually not. So, because if you see the very initial literature, which is from Paparella, which was published in 1966, and which may be the earliest literature in autosclerosis and vertigo. The
Myself,
cases,
unmute you. Let me see. You joined again. Na? 1 minute, sir. Wait. Karo.
the cases they have reported are actually the three cases which Paparella reported. One was having the Meniere's, the other was query vestibular neuronitis, and the third one was basically with the, which he suspected that it was because of autosclerosis. So in all his cases, he has reported that not only the hearing was improved, but the symptoms of vertigo did also improve. Here, one caution will always be there, and which is also again there in the textbooks are there, that if there is vertigo, that you should always suspect that there is endolymphatic, there may be endolymphatic hydrops, and this may, you may actually encounter a gusher. So that is something which you should be worried. But if like you are doing routinely the stapes surgery, you may actually benefit the patient.
Okay, sir. Another question is how to differentiate on audiology between conductive hearing loss of autosclerosis and cochlear conductive hearing loss. Vikas, sir. Prahlad,
Actually, cochlear hearing loss is a sensory neural hearing type of hearing loss, whereas conductive hearing loss will show the ear-bone gap. I think there's nothing very difficult about it.
okay, sir. One question is during pre-op counseling, how you address tinnitus? Vikas, sir.
I think Prahlad sir has to unmute him. He is muted
uh,
again. Yeah.
hello,
Prahlad
Prahlad, sir.
sir.
Yeah, I'm trying to organize. I'm trying to talk to Dr. Suratwala and
Okay, sir.
trying to resolve that
So
issue.
meanwhile, can you please unmute Dr. Gupta?
Vikas Gupta, sir.
Because
No, he is
supposed to
muting
answer
himself.
question.
Why is he muting himself?
He's
Don't
not
mute
unmuted.
yourself.
It's happened. Yeah, now
No,
he's
no.
unmuted.
Yeah, unmuted. No, he's muting himself repeatedly.
Vikas, are you muting yourself?
Yeah. No,
Okay,
no. Yes, I was muting because I just didn't want
हाँ सर
that.
क्या करें अनिरा
अच्छा हाँ, Dr. Hitesh, can you please?
Wait, sir. Sir, question from Mitul Thakkar. In case of mixed hearing loss with predominantly conductive component, what is the standard protocol for evaluation of patient?
What is in what terms that
In
you
case
want?
pre-op, sir. In case of mixed hearing loss with predominantly conductive component in patient, what are the standard protocol for evaluation of patient?
You need to do, as Sir has told, that you need to do an HRCT, but anyways, you'll be looking into the audiogram, you'll be looking into the speech discrimination scores before you decide that whether you are going in for the surgery, and you have to look for the AB gap, whether you are really going to give him a serviceable hearing or not. So if there is a significant AB gap, that is, as he or she has herself told, that there is enough conductive gap is there, conductive hearing loss is there. So nothing, I would not like to add anything else rather than that. If we are not doing the HRCTs regularly for all the cases, these are the cases where you should consider HRCT.
Okay, sir. Question from Dr. Prakash Muka, sir. Is there any role of autofloor in case of patient of autosclerosis with vertigo?
Theoretically, it may be beneficial because you see the biochemical changes that are taking place in the endolymph and also rather basically perilymph, and that actually affects the endolymph also. So theoretically, it might help.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Vikas might have something to
Yeah,
add.
yeah, definitely. Because basically, what it does is it just hastens the process. If you go by the various theories that why these patients do have vertigo, why these autosclerosis patients do have vertigo, so you have various theories for that, and one of that is that when there is an active focus, there is leaking of the toxin, these active metabolites. So autoflow, as we know, that it hastens the process. So it may actually help. It may not uh, decrease, or it may not just abolish the vertigo then and there, but it may reduce the duration of the vertigo actually.
One question is, suppose if pre-op patient has a vertigo, vertigo will be worsen or improve after surgery?
See, as I told that it depends on that what was the cause of vertigo. So you have to look into that whether if this vertigo is only because of you're suspecting the cochlear atherosclerosis and then patient is having vertigo, or the patient is having, you're suspecting Meniere's, or you're suspecting vestibular urinitis, or any other cause. But if I go by the literature, most of the people have reported that their patients actually did do better after the surgery in terms of the alleviation of symptoms of vertigo.
Yeah, Meniere's might also benefit if you have a
Yes,
coexisting Meniere's along with
yes, yes,
notosclerotic thing plaque.
yes,
So once you have done a stapedotomy,
yes,
so you have basically released the hair drops.
yes,
Yes,
very true.
yes. One important question from Dr. Pratik Porwal. After otosclerotic surgery, chances of BPPV are increase in lateral canal or posterior canal?
Very tough call, very tough.
I
Anita
just
ma'am is there.
I just cannot guess that why patient should have. Acha, matlab, okay,
Can I
he
can I
is, yeah,
can we go for this question to Dr. Srinivas sir?
yeah, sure.
Is he around today?
Yes, yes, he is there.
Then might as well have joined us in the discussions.
I will get him. I'll get him.
Yeah, please, sir.
Yeah, he's been unmuted. 1 minute.
I think he's asking because that patient remains in that position for long during the surgery. That is why he's asking, I think.
Hello,
Yeah, Srinivas.
sir.
Yeah, he's there. Okay, he's there. Yeah.
Hello,
Intently
Dr.
listening.
Nice to hear your voice.
I'm intently listening, sir.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Sir,
sir.
question of Pratik Porwal sir. After otosclerosis surgery, chances of BPPV are increase in lateral canal or posterior canal, and chances of which one cupulolithiasis or canalolithiasis are more?
I really don't know an answer for this.
Can I answer part of it?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
See, I was just reading one paper some time back, and it says that when posthumously the temporal bones of patients of otosclerosis were seen, they found some eosinophilic deposits adhering to the cupula. So maybe cupulolithiasis could be more common, but this paper is from the era when understanding about BPPV was rather poor.
Okay, sir.
Could you get me?
Sir, please explain. Repeat.
So, sir is actually telling about this post-mortem findings.
Yeah, I'm telling you about the when they studied the temporal bones post-mortem for these patients of confirmed cases of otosclerosis, they found eosinophilic deposits on the cupula in these people. And this paper is not very new. So, and the study about, I mean, the knowledge about BPPV was not very good at that point of time from that era, they have reported. So maybe these were the deposits which were basically otoconial debris or whatever, because I think otoconial debris is also supposed to be eosinophilic, if I'm not wrong. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. So
Okay, sir.
from that paper, I can say probably cupulolithiasis is more common, because they found it as a feature. they found cupular deposits in patients of otosclerosis when they studied the temporal bones.
One question is, what is otosclerotic hydrops?
I think
Avinash,
as a
sir.
result of ectasis occurring as a result of the biochemical toxins that could lead to hydrops. Dr. Srinivas might please add something.
I'm really not sure about what this term has been defined as in literature, but I can recount at least one patient who had, there is this patient whom I have seen probably around 12, 13 years ago. This is a patient at that time when I saw him, he was already around 55 or 56 age. So he had undergone a otosclerosis surgery many years ago, when he was around 25 or 26, okay, by none other than Professor Madhavaya only. So there is no doubt once he has done that diagnosis of otosclerosis, there is no doubt, there is no reason to doubt that. And this patient also, in addition to that, he used to have tinnitus and he used to get recurrent attacks of vertigo again and again, just like Meniere's attacks. Okay, they used to last a few hours, and after that, sometimes it used to be so bad that he used to be hospitalized. In fact, at one point of time when he was hospitalized, I was called to see this patient. So when I took the history, all that he was telling was continuous tinnitus. There is no temporal relationship of the tinnitus to his vertigo, but his vertigo used to come again and again, just like how vertigo comes in Meniere's attacks. And there is one thing that I want to share. In fact, in the chat also, Dr. Sohil or somebody is asking about another patient on jaw movement that she used to get few seconds vertigo or something like that. Now this patient is little different in the sense, I asked him, in your entire life, you told you've been always suffering tinnitus. Can you tell me, is there some time when you did not have tinnitus? Sometime you can remember? And he told, sir, I remember. I once went for a tooth extraction. For the tooth extraction, they gave me one injection inside. As long as the effect of that injection lasted, he told the tinnitus disappeared. Okay, only for that duration. So there are two things. Maybe the two things are unrelated, but then I'm putting it. One is related to the question, and other two separate questions. But then so that the forum is also informed of these other presentations. So one thing is, in a otosclerotic patient, only constant tinnitus and vertigo coming as only like Meniere's kind of episodes lasting few hours is one thing. The other significant thing, which was very significant for me, and in fact opened up my thinking to synesthetic sensations and all those things, and also to trigeminal vestibular cross connections and all those things. Those days was the patient's 1 point history, which he told, sir, my tinnitus disappeared for those 2 hours or 2.5 hours as long as the dental anesthesia lasted. Okay, so I'm just telling this. Some of the points may be relevant to this discussion, some may not be, but then at least placing it to the forum will make more people aware of these kind of cross connections or synesthetic sensations.
Okay, sir. Another question from Dr. Venus Patel. Role of VAMP in otosclerosis. Avinash, sir.
I am not aware of role of VAMPs in otosclerosis. No way.
See, one thing is there. One about when
May
it comes to, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So there is literature on role of VAMP in otosclerosis cases, and it is actually advisable to do a VAMP when patients are complaining of vertigo simultaneously. Simultaneously means when we are seeing them and the patient complains of vertigo. So there was this one article published in 2014-15 where they did tell that where they compared, they did OVAMP and CVAMP for these patients on, I think, around 50 patients. And the findings were that they could find that the OVAMP was the best tool to see the inner ear disabilities associated with these patients, with the otosclerosis patients. This is what I know. I think Dr. Srinivas will be having more experience, wide experience on this.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay. Again, one more thing. Same thing. So when it comes to WEMP, what is there is WEMP. Is the presence of sensorineural hearing loss does not impact WEMP, but the presence of conductive hearing loss definitely impacts on the reliability of. In fact, WEMP thresholds may not be even evoked. So we'll have to see whether the person has having
Exactly.
because whether there is a conductive hearing loss. If there is conductive hearing loss, then the reliability of an absent WEMP is not there. You can't rely on that because the signal is not even reached the inner ear. But SNHL, no problem. Because hello.
Yes, sir.
Are you sure?
Hello, sir.
Okay.
Sir, Suratwala sir is back.
So you can, we'll finish it.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please come back.
So you can ask Hitesh to.
Okay. Last question is there from Dr. Yojna Sharma. If vertigo is present in post-operative period of stapes surgery, when is the indication for re-exploration? Dr. Vikas.
Yeah, Dr. Hitesh.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Suratwala's the thing audio is okay now. After this
Okay.
question, we can restart it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Share this screen. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Yes. Do you hear now?
Yes,
Hello.
I think sir is.
Yeah, we can hear, sir.
You can take.
Please share screen.
I'll
sir.
mute myself.
Oh, he has unmuted again because.
Okay. Are you getting the picture now? Hello.
Yeah, we have the picture, sir.
Oh. So where were we? Sorry, the panelists to interrupt you like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you can
Okay,
start
now
from
we-
video this side. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're here. We're talking about the round window, and here you see
Slash,
there's a soft tissue
please,
shadow is the round window.
Please do
Hello?
slideshow, sir. Slideshow karo. Click the slideshow down here. Slideshow button. Slideshow. Oh, again your voice is gone, sir.
We are sharing the screen. We are sharing
Screen,
the
screen is okay.
I'm
Slide share.
Yeah.
The here in the lower, this button is there, na, down.
Right lower.
Yeah. That slideshow. Projection, sir.
Okay. I'll come.
Projecting. Yeah, projecting. Slideshow. Okay, go ahead. No problem. Go ahead.
Are you getting now?
Okay, now. Yeah, now we are getting. Okay.
Okay. So this is a round window. When you see the lesion of the otosclerotic is a round window here, and here you will see the halo sign. This is a brilliant white shadow you will find around the cochlear wall, and this will definitely you can label it as a cochlear otosclerosis. This is very important sign. So such case, if you get during the CT scan, naturally you don't operate and leave the patient either for hearing aid, or if it's a worse hearing with the worst score of the discrimination, you advise the patient to cochlear implant or so. Now, vestibulometry in CT-based otosclerosis. When you see, sometimes many of the patients, they get their CT scan and then consult us. So in that cases, you can do the biothermal caloric, which will show the canal paresis in about 20% of the cases. Rotational test, which is probably now obsolete, but if you are going to do in some of the centers, they do it here, and that will show the 15% asymmetry in some of the cases. But that shows almost 80% cases go unexplained. Now, why this is? That is again because of the slow degeneration of the vestibular hair cells, and which allows the effective central compensation act. Now, so once we start redefining the pathology on the information so far collected, number one is the early otosclerosis, which is usually in the osteoclastic phase. Second could be the early otosclerosis with non-episodic giddiness. Third part could be the early otosclerosis with episodic giddiness. Fourth will be the established otosclerosis with no vertigo. Fifth will be established otosclerosis with episodic vertigo, and sixth could be post of buried vertigo of early or late appearance. So all these 60 different pictures you can get in the case of otosclerosis. Now, when you are treating the vertigo in the anti-stapes surgery phase, you look on the CT scan for evidence of osteoclastic phase. If this phase usually responds to the sodium fluoride and can halt the pathological progress of the disease and so the prevention of the vestibulocochlear hair cells. So intraoperatively, what preventive measures can be taken? Those surgeons, those who are enthusiastic stapes surgeons, as well as for those who are new aspirants, I think this slide can prove of some help to them. Nowadays, we are doing the controlled platinotomy, and usually we are applying now hyaluronic acid before doing this. And the hyaluronic acid passes by the sides of the annular ligament. So how this is going to help? This is going to expand the fluid capacity for some time and will allow the effective transfer of the vital elements like electrolytes and will keep the ATP pump active throughout the procedure at least for 4 to 5 hours or so. The controlled bleeding should be seen. There is no point in bushing and bashing when there is a blood mass in the mid-layer. So wait for some time, have patience, then again get reoriented yourself and then proceed. Another important step is the anterior crura thinning. Many times you find the anterior crura is quite thick or maybe involved in the otosclerotic process. Now, this is my observation that all the stapes footplates do not have an identical position. There could be sometimes the rotation clockwise or anti-clockwise when you are sitting by the side of the patient while operating. So the crura visualization will depend on how do you sit and how is the 5 to 10 degree chances of variable rotation is there of the footplate. So accordingly, the anterior crura will appear. So the practical trick is to either you tilt the head anteriorly or posteriorly so that you may be able to see the crura. In case if you are not able to see it still, then you can lower down the head position by about 10 to 15 degrees and then you will be able to see the crura. Now problem is again thinning of the crura. How do you through? Because many times it is so much thick that even cruratomy scissor, a good cruratomy scissor won't be able to cut. So in that case, necessarily you are supposed to use the drilling machine for that. Now, when you are using the drilling machine, again, this is again practical point. Supposing a lady, a buxom lady or a fat lady on whom you are operating, and if you are a right-handed person, then it is easy to thin out the crura for the right side of the patient. But if it is the left side, and if you are a right-sided person, a right-handed person, then it makes it very difficult. Then what you can do in that case is a question. So better again, you tilt the patient of the head on your side, so then your movement will be a little bit eased out while drilling. You should use cautiously the suction or the gel bond. Never use the suction tip or the fluid leakage or the control hole. Occasionally, we are getting a footplate which is either rocking or you are getting a floating footplate or sinking footplate. 1 or 2 attempts, a gentle attempt with a very fine pick are enough. But if you are not able to retrieve the footplate, at least for the beginner, you should stop there, cover it with some fascia and call the patient after 6 months. By that time, you will see that you will be able to you will be able to complete the procedure. But then there is no point, at least for the new people or new stapes surgeon, to perform the total operation when particularly footplate is rocking or sinking. If there is a narrow niche, this is again about less than 1.5% of the cases you will find. The whole window which niche is very narrow. That time you necessarily have to do the drill out procedure, particularly in the anterior-inferior area, so that you can get the better and better access for that. correct measures of the piston. Now, any stapes surgeon, he needs to go through these stages essentially according to me. First, in the first stage, first 25 cases or 30 cases, for piston placement, before he does the placing of the piston, he should actually measure the required length of the piston by the measuring rod. Once he does sufficient number of cases in this manner, then he can go for the next step. That is, before putting the piston, you do hanging and bending test. Now, some of you are quite aware of it. Few people are doing it still. And what is the hanging test? That when you put the piston over the long process of the incus, the lower end should go in between the edges of the hole you made. Now, when you give a thrust under the long process of incus laterally, the piston should freely hang over the edges of the hole you have made. And second test is again a complementary to the hanging test. That is the bending test. Now, what do you see in the bending test? You get the lower end of the Teflon piston or whatever the piston you are using at the edge of the hole. And after that, you gently press the lateral surface of the long process of incus medially and see if it is bending without any dislocation or without any slippage from the incus. So these are the hanging and bending stages. For any stapes surgery, this is the second phase to master the technique. And the third stage, when you are doing 100 and 200 of cases of the stapes, then you don't have to go for actual measurement or even hanging and bending test. Your eye judgment hand will dictate the terms for the exact length of the piston to be used. And the last point is connective tissue sealing. Now, this is again important. When you don't seal, there are some chances of perilimb leak. And there is evidence that sometimes, even if you accidentally open the case in the revision, you may not see actually the perilimb leak. But when you dissect out the mucosa grown over the piston and take it out, then you will find some drops of the perilimb porate. But this won't be routinely. This is just for a confirmation for academic interest. So it's always better to put the connective tissue sealing. Now, what is the choice of the connective tissue? Now, from stapes surgeon to surgeon, are you hearing me? Hello? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. We are
Hello,
listening.
sir. We are hearing, sir.
We are listening.
Yeah. So keep on responding somewhere. Okay. So connective tissue sealing, it is not a personal choice, but it all depends upon what size of hole you are making. Nowadays, people are using 0.4 to 0.7 mm in range of the piston. So narrow hole technique is now popular. So if you are using a 0.4 mm system, necessarily the hole has to be 0.5 mm, and there the fat tissue seal is enough. But if you are going for more than that, say about 0.7 mm piston, and you are making a hole of 0.8 mm, then it's better not to rely only on fat, but you should use either Van Graft or a similar material like that, or even the Fasciolata at a time can be used. If Van Graft, you are not reluctant, if you are reluctant to use the Van Graft for reason best known to you. I have done nearly about 50 plus cases posted on perichondrium. Now, this technique is a bit controversial, I would say. And initially, it was thought to operate the second year. If the case is a bilateral case of otosclerosis, it was thought that second year you should use posterior thrust technique on the perichondrium instead of using a piston. The reason given behind that was that the cases operated on the first year, they used to develop some sort of a sensory neuron loss. And other thing was there was a risk always of the acoustic trauma with the piston. So this risk factor is taken off when you are going to use the posterior thrust on perichondrium. Now this is rarely now. And only disadvantage of the posterior thrust on perichondrium, all cases, both successful, but you get audiologically inferior results compared to the piston users. Now, when you get the immediate peri of vertigo or on-table vertigo, patient has got severe neurovegetative symptoms apart from the vertigo, and patient won't allow you to touch the ear again. That situation if arises, then what you should do? You should quickly examine the patient nystagmus with the VNG for the legal purpose, and there you will find either the nystagmus is paralytic type or irritative type. Mostly, commonly, it is of a irritative type, that is beating on the normal side, beating to the normal side. And another test you must perform on table, that is the absolute bone conduction. If the patient is under local anesthesia, then you can perform the absolute bone conduction. If under general anesthesia, then certainly you can't do it. Symptomatic treatment with head up should be given immediately, and intra-op check the seal you have made of the connective tissue. Check again the length of the piston, and check again the incus mobility, because many times it is observed that you have put the piston and you have tested the mobility, everything is fine, but then incus is either has become hypermobile during the manipulation or been disarticulated. So what you do in such a situation, if the incus is disarticulated, take out the piston and perform and replace it with a cartilage graft for for at least 6 months. And after 6 months, you can revise the procedure by removing the cartilage and then replacing with the piston, because by that time incus can go to its normal articulation position also. Small perilimb leaks can be sealed with the vein graft with or without piston placement at a time. If you come across the accidental gushes, now gusher incidence is almost 0.5% or so of all cephalic. But if you come across accidentally, supposingly, if you are working in some mucosal area where the imaging facilities are not available and you are intentionally or forced the surgery, and if you come across the gusher, what you should do, you should make the patient head up, at least wait for half an hour or so. By that time, your anesthetist will manage the pressure reduction of the fluid with the mannitol or furosemide, and then complete the seal with the pericondylium in this situation. Now, dislocated incus, as I already told to you previously, you can go defer the operation or do the false technique and follow closely for vertigo at least for 3 weeks in such situation. Now, there are the cases which come with delayed presentation. So consider comorbid condition, because many times we see the diabetes was under control and patient lapses taking medicine or doesn't follow the dietetic instruction and develop diabetes. This patient can also present with the vertigo, or the patient with the hypotension or hypertension can also look at morbid condition post-operatively in the late or delayed period. Consider alternate peripheral causes like neuronitis, BPPV or MD. Now, BPPV, as I gone through the chat, I think Avinash was talking about it. Now, this is again a rare scheme. And I had a discussion with Dr. Kirtane about this, and he was also not sure of the cause of BPPV. So, mostly we concluded that this is just coincidental and has nothing to do with the trauma or anything else of the procedure. Consider non-operative ES vestibulopathy. Consider adaptation phase and follow vestibulometry. Look for the functional and fear factor, and if there is no organic cause found, go for repeated assurances and tranquilizers. Now, this is an interesting situation. Autosclerosis and MD. This is a rare, troublesome, challenging to diagnose and treat. It's not sequel to each other. Both the process usually start at different times. So onsets are different. So they are not really linked directly to each other. Onsets may be different. That is why I'm telling you that the patient may come and to you with the deafness, and if you ask him vertigo, he said, yeah, kabhi kabhi aata hai, saal mein aata hai, 2 saal mein aata hai, etc. But if you look that where is the starting point, those two starting points will be usually different. Clinically severe episodic vertigo with the tinnitus and usually mixed loss with the dominant BC affection should make you strongly suspicious of the Meniere's disease. Discrimination score less than 30%, acoustic reflex, which goes on perpetuating over the time, should again be make you suspicious of the Meniere's disease. ABR test with diuretic test and echoes we have already talked about, and CT and MRI again help, which are also I have referred back you sometime. Otosclerosis with meningitis. So treating the MD on its principles conservatively. You must have a conservative approach to treat the vertigo in such cases. And go on periodic review and don't hurry for staphylotomy in such cases. If there is no response to vertigo, though in the past there have been incidences of doing sacculotomy or the staphylotomy, initial results were good to control the vertigo. But most of the cases, they have shown a great recurrence after some time. So it's no more, sacculotomy is no more popular procedures in the present context. Review the PTA after 3 to 6 months. And usually I have come across 6 to 7 cases, I think nearly, and I have performed in all the cases sac decompression, 6 to 7 resistant cases or a refractory case of Meniere's, and then the sac compression, so that will take away the pressure and you can safely do the stapes surgery after 6 months or maybe 1 year. So only 3 patients turned up after stapes surgery because their hearing loss was steadied and they were put on the hearing aid. So out of 3 patients, they were ready for the surgery, which was completed successfully. Now this is a perineum gusher. So perineum gusher is an entity you cannot diagnose clinically or otherwise. So you have to go for the scanning, and this here you will see in the middle here there is the hypodense shadow, and this is in the internal auditory canal where you will see the hypodense shadow. So this is perineum gusher, which is easily diagnosed on the HRCT images. So when you have to come across the situation of you are intending for staphylotomy and you find gushes on the images, must consider the situation as a rare and unfortunate. And the gushes are usually because of the abnormal collection established between the subarachnoid space and the perineum space. Clinically nearly impossible to diagnose, as I told you, and so rare incidents make the clinician to overlook the necessity of HRCT before surgery. Causes proposed post-test surgery, that is, one is the closure of the gusher and then the staphylectomy. But however, majority of the people, all luminaries like House, Shia, Lemon, Glossop, etc., they are not in favor of surgical intervention. So no hearing gain. That's what their experience is, and vestibular function goes on gradually deteriorating, and which is not even manageable with the VRT. Accidental situation, if you come across, better to go for the vestibular occlusion because it is a quick procedure. You can block or pack the vestibule with a muscle graft laid upon with the temporal fascia graft or the pericondylar graft. But vestibular occlusion has got a failure at about 30 to 35%. So most of the people nowadays they prefer subtotal petrosectomy to come to meet this problem of gusher, and this is 100% effective, they say. So what is the take-home message? Otosclerotic subjects may complain of giddiness at the time of diagnosis due to hypofunction suggesting in active stage of the disease where sodium chloride can be helpful. Rely more on TFT, PTA, ABC, acoustic reflex, HRCT for diagnosis and for correct estimation of the disease. If you come across surgical snags, avoid heroism, take help of teachers, seniors. There is no shame to abandon the procedure at any time. With meningitis, treat the vestibular pathology first. Gushes, if you come across or detect on HRCT, please avoid the surgery. Post-episiotomy, mild to moderate vertigo after scaling doesn't last for more than a week. However, imbalance may persist up to 6 months in few patients, which needs VRT. Now, following this, there are 2 quizzes I am posting. This is for graduates. I am keeping the slide for at least half minute, and then I'll go to the next slide and then finish my presentation. The option A is in the horizontal canal ampulopetal movement causes stronger nystagmus. Option B, in horizontal canal ampulofugal movement causes stronger nystagmus. And option C, in vertical canals ampulopetal movement causes stronger nystagmus. And answer D, in vertical canals ampulofugal movement causes stronger nystagmus. Your answer could be more than one also. This is the hint I am giving you. Can I pose the next question? Hello?
Go ahead, sir.
Okay, this is a quiz level 2. This is a long-standing episodic vertigo with a two-layer phenomena with gradual loss of hearing over right ear, 10 years. Gradual loss of hearing. The vertigo is of usually mild variety without autonomous symptoms. And this is the audiogram on left side. This is a typical UC audiogram, typical. And this audiogram has been taken after 10 years after the starting the vertigo. And the same patient, we got the MRI here, and look at this point and this point and find out what is the possible diagnosis. You can put the answers in the chat, or you can post your answer to any secretary, or even you can send the answers to Prahlad also. And I assure lucky entries who will be assuring them some academical position in our association. Okay, Prahlad.
Okay, sir.
Can I
Dr.
ask
Hitesh?
moderator
Yeah,
to
yeah.
take over, please?
Yeah, Dr. Hitesh can take over.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. There are a few questions. Question number 1 is management of post-TEPIS surgery vertigo, and when to re-explore if severe vertigo persists. Question by Dr. Yojna Sharma.
Well, on the table, if you find immediately, you should explore. Or maybe the patient is settled on operation table. But after shifting to the ward, if the patient start vomiting and all those, usually you start nursing the patient in head up. Give the symptomatic treatment, antiemetic treatment, and you can also give some diuretic at the same time. Well, usually patient settles by evening. And again, most importantly, you must give the IV supplementation. Usually, Ringer lactase as well as the glucose sodium GS, glucose saline solution you can start. Usually, my strategy is if the patient is not settled within 12 hours, then I will check the patient, absolute bone conduction, and then nystagmus study. And it is still showing the nystagmus is not settled considerably, then I would like to explore the patient immediately on the same day.
Okay. Vikas Gupta, sir, have you any experience of re-exploring anytime?
No.
Prahlad, sir, Ramesh Rohiwal, sir, want to discuss his own case. Please unmute.
Yeah, I will
him.
unmute. Yeah.
Hello, Rohiwal, sir.
Very good evening.
Good evening, sir.
Good
Please
evening,
tell.
everybody.
Yeah, good evening.
Hi, sir.
I just wanted to tell about one case which I had. The patient had presented to me with a history of fall. He had a drop attack. When he was investigated, he was investigated. His vestibular evaluation was done, and then it was found that he has nothing much significant on the all the vestibular tests. But he had a classical conductive loss, and his impedance audiometry also showed the reflexes were absent. I had discussed this case when with Professor Mohan Kameswaran, and the particular word which he had used was otosclerotic hydrop. This is the first time even I heard about that word. There are definitely, as Dr. Suratwala has correctly pointed out, there are definitely changes which are occurring in the vestibular structure. There are definite foci in the either a canal or near cupula or somewhere inside the saccule or utricle, and then it must be contributing to the vertigo which we see sometimes even routinely in our autosclerosis patient. There is one theory of some chemicals which are getting released into the endolymph and perilymph. They do cause the problem of vertigo, or it can cause even something like the patient which had a drop attack. The important thing is about this such a patients, those who have got predominant vertigo, the results of our stapes surgery about the hearing improvement, we should tell the patient that we should tell them about the guarded prognosis. As it was predicted by Professor Mohan Kameshwaran sir, this patient had good hearing for 3-4 years and then the hearing had deteriorated. So this is something which I wanted to contribute. Another thing which I feel we are all doing stapes surgery very routinely for a very long time. There is something about the consent for the stapes surgery which I nowadays advise. Myself, I am taking it very routinely and I advise my colleagues also to take it. We should take a separate consent by the patient and patient's relative that he has been explained about the surgical procedure thoroughly well. The complication and probable problems has been explained to him thoroughly. The another thing we should write is the option of using hearing aid has been explained to him. And the third point we should write that there is no guarantee that my hearing will improve. I have been explained that my hearing may go down. So these are the things we must write in a separate sort of a consent, especially for stapes surgery, because nowadays people are becoming very panicky off and on, and they are creating problems for all the doctors. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
sir.
just in corollary to what he said, if you are going to operate the second year, first year already operated, and if you want to operate the second year, there has to be a special consent to be brought in for that.
Yeah, definitely it can be added.
Yes, sir.
I'm very proud to tell you that myself and Dr. Suratwala, we learned the stapes surgery with Dr. Tepan at Pune.
Great, sir.
Yes, sir, we had a great time. With great time, with the master of masters.
Yeah, it
one-
was a wonderful time.
One
Thank
question.
you,
to-
everybody.
One question to Dr. Suratwala, sir, by Dr. Jaimin, contractor. Does you advocate applying hyaluronic acid gel or injection solution before making finish dry in foot plate?
I have
Yes,
already put
answered.
up in the chat. I have already answered in the chat.
Okay, sir. One question from Dr. Rohiwal, sir, to Vikas Gupta, sir. Checking the fixity of head of malleus before stapes surgery is undertaken every time.
Sir, obviously I just could not get the question. You mean to, matlab, sir wants me to answer whether I see it or whether I check it only.
Yeah, check it.
Yes, obviously we always check.
Prahlad, sir, please unmute Dr. Prakash Munka, sir. He want to do some comment. Hello, Prahlad, sir.
Just give me a minute. I'm trying to do.
Okay.
So as sir was telling about the consent, what we, matlab, like how we were trained at the institute, I think Dr. Prahlad will also affirm the same thing, that in the OPD itself, when we finalize the diagnosis and we tell the patient that you are having this thing, and most probably because it's a clinical diagnosis only, you have to go and see inside that whether it is the right diagnosis or not. We all explain it, and what we write on the paper that the probable diagnosis is bone conduction disease oblique otosclerosis, and both the options of surgery versus hearing aid use have been explained with their pros and cons. And then we explain that these are the chances of hearing improvement. These are the percentage of no improvement. And this is the chance of having total irreversible sensory neural hearing loss, which means deafness. So we write in the OPD paper itself when we get this, like I sign it itself myself, and I get it signed by the patient and the attendant, because once the patient is admitted few of the times, like I am not there to take the consent myself.
Yes, sir. Still
it might-
patient willing for surgery.
Yes, patients are still willing for surgery. That
Good,
is,
good, good.
yes, sir, patients are willing for surgery.
One question from Dr. Riaz. If autosclerotic vertigo is present and patient is not want to go for surgery, then what are the management for that vertigo? Dr. Bijlani, sir.
Sorry, could you go again?
In autosclerotic vertigo, if patient does not want to go for surgery, then
Yeah.
what is the management for that vertigo?
Mm, you can't keep him on medication all the time. And first of all, I think we might have to convince him,
Yes.
or you
can I
could,
answer?
or you could do a chemical labyrinthectomy in that kind of a patient.
Hitesh,
Yes, sir.
the question is about autosclerosis with vertigo or Meniere's with vertigo?
Yes.
No, autosclerosis with vertigo, sir.
So
Patient
why
has
you want to do a
autosclerosis.
chemical labyrinthectomy? Why you want to do chemical labyrinthectomy?
No, because now the thing is that, first of all, let me go back a little. Autosclerosis is a diagnosis made when you actually enter the middle ear,
Yes, sir.
when you go to operate.
Yes,
Exactly.
Patient is refusing for surgery.
yes, sir.
Patient is having intractable vertigo. Now, how are you sure whether this patient is having Meniere's disease or autosclerosis?
That's on
Once you have, if it is an episodic vertigo, okay. Now, once you have ruled out everything else, having made the patient undergo MRI, everything, all that. Now, if you're suspecting something akin to Meniere's disease, because most common thing that has been found, first of all, we are dealing with a very rare situation. Most common thing that has been found posthumously is endolymphatic hair drops. Now, why not use intratympanic gentamicin or something and relieve the patient?
Maybe try.
What else can one do? I mean, just an idea, because the
yes,
question
yes.
itself is a
I
very
Yes,
I
itself
want
is a
like,
question
Avinash,
itself
I
is a
want-
very
I-
hypothetical one.
yes.
Avinash, I won't like to take the risk in such patients, of my patients who are going to lose the hearing. There are chances of hearing. So why not, if first thing is the patient coming with autosclerosis with vertigo, this already I have conveyed in my presentation. You must able to find the cause of the vertigo. Whether it is a sequence to the autosclerosis or whether there is a coexisting pathology. So it all depends, the management depends on that, all that.
Sir,
If you
can
think
anybody,
it is
sorry
there-
to interrupt you. I'm very
Yes.
sorry to, sir, sorry, please, my apologies. Sir,
Don't be
how
sorry
can
again,
one be
don't
very,
be sorry again.
how can one be very sure that you're dealing with autosclerosis unless you have opened up the ear?
Yeah.
That is my question.
So that's the comes the roles of the HRCT. HRCT का
Sir,
role तभी आता है
is it
ना.
always, I mean, I'm not an expert on autosclerosis, sir. With due apology.
So,
Is it confirmatory? Is it always confirmatory?
yeah, it's confirmatory. There's no question. The 90%, 95% specificity is there, we have found. There is
Sir.
no question about it. Because you can't rely upon the tympanometry, you can 100% rely upon the acoustic reflex test. That I know. And what is the only
Yeah.
solution for you is either you go for HRCT or you open the ear. Now, in the past, Dr. Rival and a few other people participants in this, we used to call it as the exploratory tympanometry. We were not sure clinically. And about 10 to 20% patients were turning out to be of autosclerosis, staphylin fixation. And out of that, again, only 60%, but this was a statistic which is still ready with me. Out of that statistic, only 60% patients were the autosclerosis. Other were late presentation of congenital fixation or by tympanosclerosis or something else. So that's the situation. Even after opening, every statistic is not autosclerotic fixation. So that is to be borne in the mind.
Okay. So now, how do we answer the question that's come across, sir?
But I already answered. You go for HRCT, that is the best thing.
No, you've gone for the HRCT, fine, sir. They say
Sure.
the patient is refused for surgery.
Refusing for surgery for deafness
Question
or
that
for
has come up is,
vertigo.
patient with autosclerosis with vertigo has refused any surgical intervention. How do we manage the patient?
Oh, but if you're thinking it is only the etiology, the autosclerosis, there are no coexisting lesion, then what is the possibility? You would treat the patient like peripheral neuropathy, vestibular neuropathy. You would treat the patient like vestibular neuropathy. If the conservative treatment fails, then the only solution what remains with you is the vestibular neurectomy, nothing else.
Sir, again it's surgical.
Yeah, again, surgical. I am a
Patient has refused Stippy's surgery. Now we are offering him. Now we are offering him another surgery.
No, I am a genetic surgeon.
Sorry?
Yes, yes, sir. Sir, last question, I think, from Dr. Jaimin, contractor. To all panelists, does the entity cochlear otosclerosis exist? If patients suffer from bilateral symmetrical pure SN loss, if such entity really exists, why some important authorities disagree? Very hard question, I think.
See, Professor Jamin, only the cochlear otosclerosis can only be confirmed. Again, I am repeating on HRCT only. You will find the hello sign over there. There is no other way you can make the patient to be diagnosed with cochlear otosclerosis. The change of the speech may give the clue that patient is having a genuine cochlear pathology, but not necessarily always the otosclerotic one. So it all again depends on the patient history. So in such cases, bilateral SN loss, and I have seen this particularly in the children under the age of 15 years, those cases can be labeled as an autoimmune cause for the bilateral
IED.
deafness, bilateral cochlear loss. So autoimmune etiology has to be considered for such cases. Unfortunately, in our country, there are no confirmatory tests, serological tests available to confirm the autoimmune etiology.
Yes, Dr. Hitesh, one fortunate thing which has happened over the last few years that more of the ENTs are asking for these scans. So the radiologists, the busy radiologists, they have got a good hold on these scans to report actually, and obviously you can always see, but for the others also they are reporting it very precisely now. That is what we have observed, because we are asking them more frequently now.
Good. I think we have finished all questions.
Because can you give it to Kshitij? Can you pass it on to Kshitij?
Prahlad sir, please unmute Dr. Kshitij. Prahlad sir.
Kshitij is there?
I'm doing unmuting.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Hello, I'm online, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Suratwala, is there something?
Yes.
You wanted me to be unmuted, sir. This is for?
No, if you want to leave some message to the participant, you can leave it. Otherwise, we close the session. And before that, you announce the next session.
Hello.
Yeah, Kshitij, what's the next session? Next program?
Well, so honestly, I don't have that immediately with me. That's the Dr. Pawan.
I think
But
Dr.
we'll be sending.
Dr. Pawan was supposed to speak on the thing, migraines, vertigo.
Migraine, yes.
Yeah.
But I think he's busy with the PG exams or UG exams. I'm not sure.
Yeah, okay.
But we'll have to get the confirmation from him. But
Sure.
I think tentatively he was. But then we will have definitely some presentation on the coming Friday.
Yeah, we do have program.
So all the participants, they are requested to.
So that will be the final program, I believe. That will be the.
Dr. Kshitij, looking at your photograph, it seems the next sequel of Speed is coming very soon.
Yeah.
Really, very. It looks very handsome.
Okay, at last, I would like to thank Dr. Suratwala sir for such a nice detailed presentation on. Or also, I thank
very much for the session, sir,
and also thank our panelists, Dr. Vikas Gupta sir, Dr. Avinash Billani sir, and Dr. Anita ma'am. I am always thankful to Dr. Prahlad sir for helping in these all NES webinars. And last but not least, I would like to thank Dr. Very enthusiastic persons of our NES, Dr. Amit Kesri and Dr. Pawan Singhal, sir. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, all participants. Good night,
Thank
all.
you.
You're forgetting
you.
Dr. Srinivas, who has been
Arey
there
हाँ.
almost all,
Yes,
literally
he is
all
all,
the,
he is
all
all,
the,
he is always
yeah.
everywhere in
So,
Vertigo, sir.
and he has come to our rescue
He is,
all the time.
yeah, he is everywhere. He is everywhere in
So,
all Vertigo
big
sessions.
thanks to Dr. Prahlad sir, Dr. Narendra Suratwala, all the people out here, Dr. Pawan Singhal, Dr. Amit Keshri. Yes, I mean, it's been a wonderful, a very, very wonderful, time we have had. A
Good
great
night, all.
learning experience.
Sir, sir, doctor, please unmute Dr.
Yes,
Srinivas.
Dr.
Srinivas, yes,
Srinivas
yes,
wants to
yes.
say
Yeah,
something.
1 minute, 1 minute. Okay.
Prahlad, can
Sir,
I
good
do
evening.
anything?
Yeah,
Good evening,
he's
sir.
unmuted. He's
Yeah.
Sir,
unmuted.
wonderful.
Yeah, I have to
Actually,
go.
we were thinking what is there in otosclerosis? There is so much there in otosclerosis and vertigo. Okay. So, and Sir Majumdar sir has called and he could not join. There was some boy who used to help him in joining the Zoom meeting today. He did not come. So he could not come. So he was conveying his regards to all of us. And he also remembered Dr. Hitesh. He told that very close to Morbi, there is one more medical college, Kathiawad or something. So he was there as a head of the department in that medical college in his early days. So he wanted
He was at
to.
Jamnagar. Srinivas.
I think.
Yes,
He
sir.
was at Jamnagar.
He was
Okay,
But
Jamnagar.
he used to go to Mohi for I do not know for what. But he was referring that he used to enjoy the jalebi and something of the sort over there. Hapra maybe.
Okay. Okay, sir.
I had a call from him
Yes, sir.
asking.
Yes.
He was asking for apology
Yes, sir.
to forgive because there are some problems with his laptop or somewhere something of the sort.
Okay, sir.
Uh-huh.
That's all, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay,
all.
Srinivas,
Thank you,
just take the care. Srinivas, please talk to Pawan for the next program, please.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
all.
Sure,
everyone.
sir.
Good night.
Good night,
Good
sir.
night.
Good night, sir.
Okay, good night all. Good night all.
Good night all.
Take
Bye,
care
all.
of you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.